For many people, the Royal Melbourne show just isn't a show without this next event. So on celebrating the show online tonight, we're going to speak to the voice that you hear when you enter the Woodchop Pavilion. Darrell Meyer, it's such a shame we're not at the real show this year, but we're going to tell some tales anyway. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great, Lyndsey. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Now, I heard a rumour that you actually started competing as an axeman, perhaps an axe boy, at the age of 13.
That is actually true, Lyndsey. That is very, very true indeed. And that was at the Saltwater Festival down in Footscray at the bottom of the university, right behind the Royal Melbourne Showgrounds.
Who taught you how to be an axeman?
Well, our surname in the family is called Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. And, of course, we've had anywhere up to 13 members competing at one stage of the game. So it has been in our family as long as I've been born. So naturally, my father and my brothers have all had input into my woodchopping career.
Tell me, what heights did you reach as a competitor before moving on to the next phase of your career that we'll get to in a moment?
Well, the world of sport, I'm pretty sure everyone will remember that, the great voice of Jack O'Toole there with the count. And on Channel 7, I won the novice underhand championship there around about 1986, and one of the guys helped me out there was Lawrence O'Toole Senior.
Tell me, you've now moved on to the role of commentator at the Royal Melbourne show. You've been doing that for nearly 40 years.
Yeah,
what is the responsibility there? I mean, it's got to be a safer job than being an axeman.
Well, yes, I still do compete at our country shows, Lyndsey, but the responsibility at the Royal Melbourne show is not only to be a commentator, you have to be informative, you have to be alert, you have to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on down on the ground, and also we have to run on time because it's critical because our showground at Melbourne is so huge. If mum and dad and the kids want to come from, say, the Showbag area, they have to get to our woodshop by a certain time, so we must run on time. Critical.
Speaking of the storytelling, I've heard a couple of different versions of how the sport of woodchop came to be. Can you tell me your version?
Well, there are many versions, as you know, and the sport did originate in Australia, in Tasmania, of course, a little country town we do believe is Ulverston, okay? And I've been there and had a little bit of a visit, and they've got a tree climber climbing a tree there because, you know, the Tasmanians are sensational tree climbers. And 1862, that's about it. A couple of guys had a bit of a bet. I do believe it was in a bar or a saloon in those days, and they decided to have a bit of a go on the weekend with a very large 3-foot diameter log. Of course, they were all unprofessional at that stage of the game. It was a bit of a bet in a bar as a joke. That's how the sport actually originated and rolled on to be competitive.
Well, it's certainly a very popular sport today, and the one thing that really strikes me when I watch it is it's a sport for a whole variety of ages. It's fantastic to see the axe women out there now absolutely carving up and competing, and you often see trans-Tasman competitions. How do you make sure the next generation are getting involved and taking up the great pursuit that is woodchop?
Well, this sport really is predominantly a family affair. It is very difficult to get outsiders to come into our sport and be a part and be involved in it because you've got to understand, with cricket, you can go to the nets with your mate and play bat and ball. With footy, you can kick through the big sticks and aim your football at the goalpost. But when it comes to wood chopping, it's very, very difficult to get timber to train on. And it's a very expensive sport to get involved in because our racing axes are realistically around $800 each complete.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Now, I'm curious to hear about the big event that occurred last year. The Royal Melbourne show hosted the World Tree Felling Championships. You had the responsibility to commentate and announce that. Tell me a bit about what that was like.
That was sensational. The girls and the team behind the woodchop there at the Royal Melbourne show has done a sensational job from the previous year to try and make sure that we do obtain that world title. As you probably know, Sydney is the home of world titles, and we were so very happy to have one at the Melbourne show. And, of course, main arena, where else would you want to have it at the Melbourne show? Seating capacity of around about 5,000. So, and it was a great night, no rain, and as you know, Melbourne in springtime will be very, very dicey.
One of the cool things about Woodchop is that I reckon the crowd often sit down not knowing a lot about it, but it's so easy to get involved, and it's so exciting to watch and to pick someone to get behind. You've got an incredible responsibility as the announcer and commentator there. What are some of the tricks of the trade that you want to pass on to the next generation of commentators in that arena?
Well, the tricks of the trade really is to, first of all, get yourself some good axes, quality axes. And we have a great sponsor, the Royal Melbourne show. Pete Lynch is the guy's name. He's a local guy in Victoria Wood End, and his brand of axes are called Engineered for Axemen. So he supplies a lot of our young guys around the rural shows with trophy axes so that they can start in the competition. So then, if you get lucky enough to get a coach, and to get a good coach in the sport of wood chopping is very difficult, Lyndsey, because it's not like football where there's hundreds of them. In our sport, they're very, very limited. So if you can get yourself a good coach, you're on a very successful path to championship world.
I often ask people what their most memorable moment has been at the Royal Melbourne show. I want to ask you the opposite question because you're in a pretty dangerous pavilion there. Is there a totally forgettable or regrettable Royal Melbourne show moment that you'd rather erase from history?
Well, last year in the main arena, not only besides having the world title tree felling event, we had a teams event in the main arena where we were trying to beat a world record, where we had a standing block, an underhand, a double-handed saw, I believe, and a tree felling, of course. And we selected the guys predominantly to try and beat that record that we had to set, which I think was 3 minutes, 50 seconds. And we beat that record nearly every night, except for one night. The ground was very dewy and slippery, and we had a young guy called Todd Bergerson from Western Australia, which was going very well to beat that record, but in the top board on the front side of the tree, he slipped, lost his footing, and fell out of the tree from the top position. Now, that is a nightmare for a commentator because, first of all, you need to keep the crowd's attention off the danger zone, but you're also very, very worried for the competitor. He hasn't been hurt or cut, and that was really scary for me.
And tell me he got up and he's okay today.
He actually did get up. And you know what? He could not stop apologising to me for not beating that record that night.
Oh, goodness, what a good sport. That's pretty extraordinary. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here and ask you, is there a particular person who just embodies the spirit of the Royal Melbourne show in your eyes? Is there a particular person when you think Woodchop at the show, this person, they really live and breathe it?
Well, I've got to tell you, in the modern era, I've seen lots of great axemen over the years and David Foss's and Jack O'Toole's. But when we talk about tree felling, he's not a young man anymore. He's around about 50-odd. Matthew Gurr from Tasmania is no doubt one of the greatest modern-era axemen in the tree felling. He's won the Australian title there 19 years in succession. That's sensational. That is an amazing performance. And he also cut against his son in the world title last year at the Royal Melbourne show in the main arena. Now, young Daniel won his first world title at the Royal Melbourne. The second guy that really impresses me so much in the modern era is, of course, the famous man himself, Lawrence O'Toole Jr. The man, as you probably know, has a very, very good knack of winning underhand, hard-hitting and world title events. Now, he's won that event at Royal Melbourne, the hard-hitting underhand, 16 years in succession. David Foster was only fortunate enough to win that 10 years in a row. Lawrence O'Toole was only lucky enough to win it, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row. It's Lawrence O'Toole Senior. So the modern era axemen, Lyndsey, they have a lot more advantage than our old guys. They're more fitter. Our axe technology has come a long, long way compared to axes in the olden era. So these guys, in my eyes, are probably some of the best axemen you'll ever see. There are some also future bright stars coming along. Young Darrell Meyer, which is part of our family. He's also up and coming in the underhand, as you've probably heard his name quite a lot. And there's a young guy in Tasmania, Cody Steers, is coming along well, along with young Mr. Ute over there, young Daniel. He's going to be a superstar under tree felling. His records, he's got a big history there. Dad's won 19 Australian championships. He's got to sort of try and he's got time on his side, but that's a big risk to sort of take, isn't it?
Well, it's just so exciting to hear that there's this whole crop of the next generation coming up and they've got wonderful mentors and leaders ahead of them. You're certainly one of those. And I think on behalf of the mums and dads and boys and girls from across Victoria and beyond that get to sit at the Woodchop Pavilion and watch the fantastic sport and spectacle that is Woodchop and listen to your voice that takes them on the journey through all of that. It educates them. It gets them involved in the sport and excited about the competitors. A big thank you to you, and I just cannot wait to be sitting there in the Woodchop Pavilion this time next year, listening to you and watching our competitors, especially those next generation guys. Darrell Meyer, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Lyndsey, but you forgot to ask me one question.
What is it?
You use the nails in the logs. That's what everyone wants to know. In our wood chopping fraternity, we all know about it, but the outside crowd, that's our job as a commentator, to inform the people on the outside why we use those nails.
Well, now you have to tell me.
Well, it is when we hit the log, we always hit the log in the opposite direction of the nails. Like in a standing block, the vertical log, the nails are facing the top section. The competitor normally strikes the log in an upward motion with 2 blows, and assuming the nails weren't there, would slab a very big piece of timber away, gaining a slight advantage. We make sure the nails are there to ensure there are no advantages taken by any competitor from competitor number 1 all the way down to competitor number 2. That's the reason why we use those nails.
Well, this has been both entertaining and educational. Thank you so much, Darrell. See you at next year's show.
You're more than welcome, Lyndsey. Have a look at that hat. Welcome to the Melbourne Show in 2021.